Gentlemen, thank you for coming. This is an exciting day. It's an exciting day for air transportation in Clinton County, the North Country, and in southern Quebec. We realize that the air industry is hitting tremendous hits. There's airlines that have declared bankruptcy or whatever, but let's not forget that this country was built on moving passengers and cargo as fast as they could to various areas around the world. This will come back. The air industry will come back. And we're definitely confident about that, and I think everybody in this room realizes that. The thing we want to realize is that we're pointing not for tomorrow, not for next year, but where we are 5, 10, and 15 years down the road. And that's exciting, and it has us all excited. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about, and we'll show you some tentative plans, and I want to make sure this is understood, tentative plans for what we consider a benchmark terminal facility that we can all be proud of, and will make this North Country proud. What I'd like to do, first of all, is just introduce the people that are behind me, because this is not a one-person show. It has been a tremendous experience to work with people from PARC, attorneys from all over the state, and from our legislators and people that have worked for the county. So we have Sam Trombley, Bob Butler, Mary Luther Fayette, John Gallagher, Ralph Hensel, who's our airport chairperson, Jeff Phelan from CNS, Mike Zerlo, assistant administrator, and Rodney Brown. What I'd like to do is start with, if I could, is have Ralph briefly talk about the MAPS program, because I think this is extremely important, and I have learned things in the last week about what MAPS really stood for. It'll be quick, but I think we need to know some of the limitations and some of the positive things that the MAPS program brings to this facility, especially the funding. Ralph, would you like to just make a couple comments, please?
Okay, the MAP program is an acronym, stands for the Military Airport Program. It is a portion of an overall fund, the Aviation Trust Fund. When you purchase an airline ticket, there's a federal tax on that ticket. And a portion of that tax goes into the Aviation Trust Fund. And part of that goes into the Airport Improvement Program, and a sub-portion of that is the MAP program. So I guess the point there is it is not your income tax dollars that are funding the MAP program. Generally speaking, the MAP program is structured to supply approximately $20 million to a particular community faced with the reuse effort of a former military installation as an airport, as a public use airport. The county 2 years ago went through a process resulting in a decision to become the sponsor of Plattsburgh International. Plattsburgh International is the name of the airport, the former Plattsburgh Air Force Base. With this MAP program, once you are accepted into the program, it is a 5-year program, and you receive money each federal fiscal year for a 5-year period. It's important that we keep our projects on track with that schedule. If we fall out of that schedule, there is no money beyond the 5-year period. So once the 5 years begins, we must have our capital improvement projects pretty much completed within that 5-year period. So we're on a fairly fast train here. That's generally what the program entails. So again, it is not income tax dollars. The program covers 90% of the project costs. 5% is borne by the state of New York, and by the way, they've agreed to that support. And 5% is a local share paid for by the county. Does that answer the question?
Very good, thank you. Ralph, you want to go? Sure. Okay. What I'd like to do, first of all, is show you the site location for the new terminal building. And the whole county legislative group was involved in this. We thought this was going to be more of a problem than it really turned out to be, and we'll go through quickly why. Let me just say that that the terminal building itself will be approximately 5 times the size of the terminal that we have there now. We're not thinking small. We have a one-time opportunity. We're thinking large, and with something, as I said before, we certainly want this area to be proud of. This, and we can thank General LeMay for this. This is our layout, the layout of the airfield itself. There were 4 or 5 different locations that we looked at. I don't know if everybody can see this. That we looked at to determine where we could put this terminal. One of the options was, let me try and lay this out for you so you have an understanding. This is north. Everybody remembers the Air Dubai or Air Dubai 747? That sits right about there. This is east, south, and west. One of the options was, why not on the west side, which to a certain extent made some sense because it was away from cargo, it was away from park, it was away from our things here. The problem with this site was, when you think of the miles of tarmac that we have, we didn't have a taxiway. We would have to spend monies to put a new taxiway in. We have wetland problems. We have no parking facilities even close. The cost factors on this would be another $26 million more added onto the program. So very quickly we realized that option was out. The east option, and people wondered about the fact that we have an alert facility, and could we place the terminal building in the alert facility along Arizona Avenue? What you find out when you get in and look at some things that the government was able to do, you sometimes, because of codes, cannot do the same thing with the private sector. And as we now know, the alert facility would not be functional for a terminal building and would have to be demolished. To the tune of approximately $800,000, which is not a MAPS funding program. The other thing that people need to realize is the powers to be here. This piece of land actually is not included. This is EDC 1 land, it's not PDC land. So this actually is not flight line designated, if that's the right word. This land is actually, we're negotiating with the city of Plattsburgh. One of the things we determined when we did this with the city, in order to be able to possibly take this piece of property over, was that we would make sure that it was a taxable, whatever was put there would not be in lieu of taxes, it would be a tax revenue producing piece of property. So that was out. The south end, very briefly, we had wetland problems, we had drainage problems. That didn't work. We ended up coming back, and it was pretty graphic when we got on our bus and got to the north end. What you don't realize, unless you're familiar with this, how huge this apron on the north end of the runway is. It is a tremendous piece of concrete. And that is when we looked at it and realized where we were going, where we decided the terminal building should be, for a number of reasons. One, the ability to see this building from Route 22. This is going to be an eye-catching event when you drive around 22, either from the east or from the west, to see this facility standing here. We've been able to get, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ralph, or my tentative agreement from the DOT, as far as the ability to enter and egress this area with a roadway, which was an important factor. And correct, I don't know if some of the people have been familiar with the DOT, but they were very helpful and got this tentative approval done quickly because we needed the time to get moving. So this is going to be visible. It's going to be easy access. And we have tremendous room for expansion. I mean, we have a tremendous ability to expand. Anything that Ralph or Mike would like to add to that? Why don't we then shift, and what we're going to show you now is some tentative plans. And what you have to realize, and I appreciate the media, I know there have been a lot of meetings that have gone on, and let me just emphasize that one of the committees that met, that will make one of the final determinations on this, just met last night for the first time. So it's hard to preempt a meeting, and I'd rather at least get our meeting started before we got this really presented, because I want people to know, these are tentative, extremely tentative, but you ought to have an idea of what we're looking at. It's pretty exciting. What we might do, and I think this is a good idea, to give you some idea of relative size of the parking facility that is out there, basically on the apron. This represents, I think, about a 28,000 square foot building. This gives you, that's probably a 737, but we had one with a 747. The terminal building itself, the way it's proposed, will hold about 300 passengers and baggage. That's planing and deplaning. We would have the ability, with the square footage that we're talking about, to put 400 people in the terminal facility, which is a tremendous expansion over what we have now. But I think we have to remember, we're talking down the road. We're talking about something that will happen in the future, and this will be a success. Ralph, why don't we then go to just one of the, and I might have CNS come up here if they might. Jeff, why don't you do the first one? We have a couple of ideas that we kicked around, and I guarantee you when you get people in the room and you start talking about plans, this was one of the first ideas that we talked about. I would say probably at this point this is probably not in the running for one of the final ideas, but let's, if you would, Jeff, just give some ideas of what that represents.
Sure, this is one thing we came up with to kind of reflect some of the newer type buildings being built, what we coined the Adirondack style. Very open, very spacious, very grand entrance, a lot of natural light, utilizing wood and stone facade, maybe a copper roof or green standing roof, some fireplaces to accent the building. That was just our original initial idea on how to get the committee thinking about various ideas for the terminal building. That's, I thought, unless you have anything for Albert.
Is that front and back, or?
Yes. This would be the land side, or where you, this is the land side, we drop passengers off, and this is the air side. Notice a two-story scenario where you would have your jetways and et cetera out the back. The next thing we looked at was to reflect on more of the community, what we coined the monumental or the military theme. Very bold brick type structure. Again, heavy accent on the wood, or the stone, the brick masonry. Again, a greenish roof to blend in. Very open, glass front. One thing we did keep in mind is, since 9/11, there's a lot of more restrictive design criteria that have to be utilized in designing a terminal building. The use of windows is kind of going away. So this is makes a very bold statement. We try to get windows up high, natural light, to make it a very inviting area.
One of the nice things that you'll see when you're out there, if you want to look at the vista, and Jack Stewart brought this up last night, when you're up higher on that area, you do get a great view. You get a great view of the mountains to Camel's Hump and to the east, and the Adirondacks to the west with Line Mountain. It's really a beautiful spot. And we want to incorporate, I say we, the group has looked at incorporating an openness to this facility. In other words, have it open so you don't feel like you're in a box, but that you're surrounded with natural light, and there is an area, it doesn't show on this drawing, we're on the second floor, you can look out over the whole area. This is a tentative. There are a lot of things that have to happen with this. We might find we're going to scrap this idea and go to something else. I think the things that you need to realize is that we're basically looking at, what, an $8 million building, somewhere in there, 28 to 30,000 square feet, the ability to handle 300 to 400 people, the ability to expand. And let's put the first drawing back up if we may, that has the parking. Because I think it's important to realize that we're looking at this with the ability to expand. And I actually would use this one, that's okay. You might just want to mention, if you would, how you would expand jetways.
Sure, we're just trying to plan into the future. It's always hard to build a building that's going to accomplish, meet today's needs and plus needs 50 years down the road. So what we looked at, this, if you will, would be ticketing. This, if you will, is baggage, and this wing here would be the jetways. Which makes expansion very easy. Add additional ticketing, expand this way, and then if you need more ticketing, you're going to need more room for baggage. We would expand the building this way, and if you need ticketing and baggage, you certainly need more jetways, and this would expand this way. So it makes the building very functional down the road also. So we haven't painted ourselves in a corner, we feel.
This is 2 stories because, as you know, that with the jetways, with some of the 747s and larger aircraft, you need the 2nd story to be able to get in and out of the aircraft. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. As far as internal floor plans are concerned, I mean, if we want to discuss that a little bit, we can. I don't know.
They're still working with a lot of issues.
There's some things that we can talk about because it might come up. We discussed the possibility of you put a restaurant in this facility, and we came up with the idea that conceptually, if we had jillions of dollars, there were things that we would like to do that we have to, in my opinion, based on MAPS funding and taxpayer money and whatever, put on a back burner, but have the ability in the future to do that. One would be the addition of possibly a restaurant, not necessarily in this structure, but connected to the structure. The ability for, somebody mentioned covered parking at one of the meetings. I mean, these are things that we can think about. I'm not going to say we're going to fantasize about them, but they're things that we would have the ability, because of this huge area, to be able to incorporate in the future, and I think that's important. I think the one statement I want to make is we do have the ability to expand, and I hope we are able to find out we need 3 or 4 jetways in this before it's over, so we can handle 2 or 3 larger aircraft at once. So there is no restaurant in this facility at this time. There is a possibility of a snack bar and things along that line. But I want to turn this over to Sarah Rowden, briefly, Legislator Rowden, who came in, and that the neat thing about this, not only do we design and come up with ideas for the exterior of the building, we determine the motif down to the chairs as to what we're going to put in the interior of the building. So Sarah graciously, who has been involved with the connector road, now we have her involved with the transport. If we can get her with Bombardier, she'll have the trifecta, planes, trains, and all.
I will be the multimodal center, right? I'm very excited about this project. I'm excited about my part of it, which will be to work with the architects and the engineers to determine what the interior is going to look like. We talk about how beautiful, the views are when you get up onto this part of the runway. So we would need to have the interior design reflect the beauty that's outside the windows. A lot of what's going to, how that interior is going to look is going to certainly depend upon which design is chosen, whether we go with an Adirondack look or the military, or how the exterior looks will determine the interior. My hope is to have some people from the community to help in doing this, so that the interior will be one that is truly reflects and represents this part of New York State and our community. I hope that it will be one that will be timeless, that it will be something that we can be proud of, not only when it's first finished, but 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and something that makes a real statement and is done very tastefully. So we're looking forward to working on this project, and I'm looking for community people to help in this piece of it. So thank you.
Sarah. Gentlemen, is there anything else you'd like?
I just want, the part of the site selection process too was where the site was actually determined that in fact the room exists there for all the expansion that
Oh,
was
that's-
documented.
And that's one thing that the committee that we had our first meeting with last night, our next meeting will be in a bus to take the people out in the our county legislative group went out to get on that apron, because you just don't realize how huge that is until you're out there. So there was a question at one of our committee meetings about space, and until you get out there and see, you can't realize. But we have enough, we can expand and expand and expand. This is an evolving process. It's an evolving process revolving around different leaders in the community. We want to get the community involved. There are timetables and timeframes. We are planning, and Jeff, you can help me out with this, as to when you expect bids to go out on this?
Yeah, we plan on having the design complete. and
Could you,
Sure. We plan to have this
to
project.
the podium?
Oh.
To the mic, to the mic.
We're at a pretty fast-track pace for this project, but our plans right now are to have this project designed and receive bids January, February of next year, start construction spring of 2004, and be completed construction spring of 2005.
And the first plane will land? Ralph? When?
I'm not sure. They're landing now.
Ralph, you might want to just quickly mention what's going on out there now. I mean, with the lighting, I mean, we talked about that. You might just want to mention, there is MAPS money that we have already spent before we got to this step. And Ralph might just want to briefly mention what's been going on.
This is my chance. He's actually giving me the podium here for a moment. This is dangerous, you realize. A little bit of history, very brief. We're where we are because of the efforts of PARC. We're 7 years since the Air Force left our area, and the county has been engaged in the airport portion of the reuse effort for the last 2 years. We wouldn't be where we are without the efforts of PARC, and I think it's appropriate to acknowledge that. Now, having said that, we have been accepted into the MAP program. We were accepted into it last federal fiscal year, and we received $2 million. The largest project that we are working on with that money is the narrowing of the runway from 300 feet to 200 feet, and that involves mostly the relocation and installation of new runway lights from the edge to 50 feet in from the edge of the pavement. That's required to meet Part 139 certification requirements. In addition to the relocation of the runway lighting, actually they're all new fixtures, and all new cabling, and all new constant current regulators of the electric pole. We're also installing all new airfield signage, those illuminated signs you see that tell the pilot which taxiway is on, which runway he's taxiing to, and such as that. Those are all being installed as part of the project. In addition to that, we're painting the runway, and that's a fairly involved process. We're using epoxy paint, so all the old paint has to be stripped and removed, and all new markings applied. So that's going on this summer. While we're doing that, and concurrent with that, is an Air Force soil remediation project involving digging, I'm going to call them ditches, 3 major ditches, one just east of the apron, one between the apron and the runway, and one on the west edge of the runway. Those are fairly significant projects. Those are occurring this summer. Along with all of this construction, we have tenants at that facility. The largest and the one that most of you are most familiar with is Pratt Whitney, and they have an ongoing operation, so we have to try to dovetail our airport work in with their schedule, and we're doing that. Air One, a new tenant at Plattsburgh International, also has an aggressive program involving aircraft maintenance, and that will be occurring this summer, so we have to work around them. There's a lot going on out there. That's the good news. And of course, the hope is that the industrial side of that airport will continue to grow. And from what I'm seeing right now, that's going along very well.
Anything else, gentlemen? Questions? Joe, you've been wanting to ask me a question for the last 6 months. It's long and answer for as long as I can.
Well, obviously, looking down the road, you have this beautiful facility built and everything. You need somebody to fly in and out of it. Where does that fit in the process?
Ralph, you want to talk a little bit about that? Air carriers, because that's a good question.
Yes, it is, and I'm, some of this is my opinion, some of it's fact. I'll try to differentiate. Not always easy. The backbone of the airport, as it exists now, will be industrial aviation. And we hope that the revenue generated from the industrial side will come close to carrying the airport. Second and distinct from that is the scheduled service portion of the airport. That is, of course, the need to which the airport terminal addresses. And that's what we're engaged in designing right now. Of course, we have a commuter service today in Plattsburgh at the county airport, Commute Air with the Continental Connection franchise. Now that may change over time. Most of you are familiar with the Essential Air Service program, and that's a bidding process. Commute Air may be our carrier in the future. It may be another carrier. But in all likelihood, we will have a carrier, at least some form of commuter scheduled service. Now, we have a very large runway, 11,700 feet long, capable of handling almost any aircraft in the air today. Because of that, we feel it is, and the committee feels, it is very important that any terminal that we design have a jetway capable of coupling to a large body aircraft. That does not mean we're going to have scheduled service between Plattsburgh and Paris, France next year. But it does mean we probably will have jet aircraft coming into this airport in the future. That has already happened. It's not clearly predictable. It might be an athletic team going to Lake Placid, uses our facility for access with the large runway and the generally good weather conditions as opposed to, say, Saranac Lake. So we are supporting not only Clinton County, but also Essex County in the Lake Placid area. That's, I suppose, worth mentioning. So there will be some large aircraft. How that will grow, we don't know. I can tell you this, Plattsburgh International can accommodate regional jets. Clinton County Airport cannot. The runway is not long enough to meet the critical field length requirements.
There's also charter service, and I think Southern Quebec is something that we're looking at. I think if you asked that question maybe to Burlington 10 or 15 years ago, I mean, this is where I feel we are. And I think now we have an opportunity, having moved our facility to the facility we have, that we can start to move forward. So we have the opportunity to charter. There's a lot of things that can take place. Have they taken place yet? I am amazed, Joe, when I think about where we were a year ago as to where we are now as far as the planning stages go. And if that's any indication, we're on the right track for sure. Yes, Bob?
Can you say this proposed building is about 5 times the size of the current one? Can anybody compare it with Burlington so you have an idea what it?
It's smaller. I don't know to what degree.
Because Burlington's expanded like 2 or 3 times in the last 2 years. I don't know what a 30,000 square foot facility in the Burlington, you know, if you took the Burlington airport, I don't know. What, would you say 50 or 60?
50 or 60, that's a guess.
So it maybe is half.
Do we know how many people fly in and out of Clinton County Airport daily now?
That we know.
And how many would that be?
We measure that activity with a term called enplanements, number of boardings. In the early 1990s, our boardings were about 22,000 annual. Today, they're about 3,000.
Well, with a 28,000 square foot facility, you're talking fewer than 100 a month. Why do you need a 28,000 square foot facility to handle a handful of people.
Wow. Go ahead. Well, and that was one of the questions that we talked about early on. Do we leave the airport where it is now? We've already crossed that bridge. Do we stay where we are with the facility we have, or do we have an opportunity, a one-time opportunity to expand? Do we put our heads in the sand and say the North Country's not going anywhere, we're going to stay where we are, we can't handle regional jets, or do we say it's time to move forward? And this whole legislative body, and it was a tough decision, the people standing behind me unanimously said it's time to move. We have this facility, we're in the MAPS program, let's do it, and let's get it done, and let's start to market. And that's what we have to do. So it's a question of, if we have 5 people now, what will we have 10 years from now?
Do you have any money, you've got a lot of money for buildings and everything, do you have any money in there for marketing the program, and what would you do to market it?
Now, at this point, see, that's Parks, that's not our ability to do yet. I mean, that's something down the road, and I don't want to step on the Parks marketing system. The Park basically has been marketing industrial facility. And there's some exciting things that are coming that are going to bring that area up to speed. As to how we're going to market this airport, that's something that we need to discuss, and we will be in the near future. I don't know if that answers your question. Gentlemen, you want to step up?
Well, I think I'll just give my opinion on that airport sizing, the terminal sizing issue. If we base our efforts on history and on the current use of the Clinton County Airport, we will probably end up with something approximating a telephone booth out on the apron. We have decided that's not the way to go. We're building a terminal that will meet what we believe to be the needs of our community. We have a large runway. It can accommodate a large airplane. You have to have the ability to put people on such an airplane and to take them off. Hence, that brings you up into the level of 300 passengers. Once you get into the arena of accommodating 300 passengers, you're into a facility that is much larger than what the current county airport terminal is. In addition to that, we have new TSA, Transportation Security Administration requirements that take up more space. We have tried to size this terminal at a size that we feel is reasonable and that supports our needs. Hopefully that answers.
I'm involved with one committee that wants to see this terminal be 3 times as large as what we're proposing. So, I mean, we're trying to, and that's part of CNS's responsibility, to keep us in line with the FAA and the MAPS program, so we don't totally go way too far one way or the other.
So you'll be built, what, 05 or 6?
05.
And what will be the cost of maintaining that building annually?
Like I think Ralph mentioned, the plan is that the industrial development that exists there today will cover the cost of ongoing.
And the cost would be?
What's your budget, Ralph?
That's a good question, and I don't know that there's any airport. I've heard this somewhere, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I've heard that there's no airport that runs strictly by passengers by itself. There are cargo. There's
Sure.
a myriad of different things that funnel the income in to keep the air, especially in this day.
Can the county afford the cost, whatever it is?
We feel
And
we
how
can.
much is it?
Yeah, we feel we can. Ralph?
Right. We're sort of going back and forth between history and the future and where we are today. Rodney Brown, who was here earlier, and I did a study about 2 years ago. It took us 8 months. And part of that was a financial analysis and what we thought it might cost to operate this facility. And we're in the 1.2 million annual level. That was what our study showed. And our revenue today, while it is not 1.2 million from that footprint, it isn't too far from it. So that's good news. That's from the industrial side only. The county airport operates in the red today at roughly $250,000 a year. If you add that to the shortfall, you're very close. So financially, yes, we think this is doable. If it was not doable, we wouldn't be here today, I can assure you. The legislature reviewed the numbers very closely before they decided to support this effort.
So 1.2 million would be the annual cost.
That's
The new
roughly
airport.
the annual operating budget in round numbers.
Income,
That's the income we hope will approach that.
you hope the income will approach 1.2 million.
The cost is 1.2. We hope the revenues generated within the footprint equal or come close to equal.
How much income do you have now?
Well, I can't approach exact
Ballpark?
numbers, but it's over 750,000
A month, a year?
a year.
Are there talks going on with Commute Air to have them move over, or where does that stand?
All right. Commute Air is a private company, of course. They operate an airline that historically has been based in Plattsburgh. They've had different franchise agreements currently with Continental. They are currently hubbing out of Albany County, in Albany, actually Albany International. They recently have made a decision to relocate their maintenance operation, as you know, to Albany, and that will be accomplished by the end of May. As of now, they're maintaining corporate headquarters here. They're maintaining their flight following and dispatch operation here, and they will be continuing to operate the FBO for the county airport. Where that will go in the future, we don't know. I would suggest that a part of that will be the decision on the essential air service subsidy. And if that favors them, then more than likely they will stay here until we relocate the airport.
Would Commute Air like to get out, like to be released from the contract?
They have no contract. We currently do not, they do not receive any funding under the Essential Air Service Program for service to the Clinton County Airport.
They get no subsidy at all?
Not for Clinton County Airport, no. The facility is eligible. They have never applied before. This is the first year that they've applied for that subsidy.
Ralph, what happens if they don't get the essential air service money? They said they're going to be pulling the administration out too.
I can't speak for Commute Air, to be completely honest. I don't know what they will do. I would suggest that subsidy is important to them.
What are the indicators that Clinton County will grow into an airport like this?
For
Well,
300 people.
We already have, the new facility, Plattsburgh International, has an industrial footprint that the Clinton County Airport does not have. And thus it has the ability to receive revenue that's generated from that footprint, and that's occurring right now. While we're in this transition process, the county has contracted with Park to do the day-to-day operation of the facility for 1 year, and that might turn into 2 years. They are doing the marketing, and they're doing the snow plowing, they're doing the grass cutting for right now, for 1 year. And that's affording us the time to do all the projects necessary to bring the airport up to speed. And at some point, we will take over the grass cutting, the mowing, such as that. The industrial side is there, and that's growing, and the revenue from that is increasing. Oh, I should mention, for this 1 year period, the revenue generated from that industrial side is flowing to the county, and then it flows back to Park to pay them for their services. When we take over completely, all of that revenue flows to us. But of course, we have the burden of operating the airport.
So in the foreseeable future, then, the industrial side of the operation would be predominant?
Yes. And then we build the terminal. I'm looking into the future here, and none of us can predict the future. We certainly hope to have scheduled service, at least at the commuter level, maybe we'll be able to increase the aircraft size to the regional jet size.
Well, it sounds like marketing is an important element.
It will
in this.
become that.
Do you know how much marketing Park is, have you talked to them, how much marketing they're going to do for you, and how much money should be put into marketing to move the airport?
We'll face that, we'll face those issues in the
You
future.
haven't done anything now?
It's very difficult to market a facility that does not exist. Remember, this
But
is
I
not
mean,
a certificated airport.
surveys or anything?
It will take us at least 2 years to bring the airport up to the point where scheduled service is allowed. So it's tough to market a facility that doesn't exist. That is one reason Park has had a difficult time developing the aviation portion of the base. It's a tough sell. The real key to that process was when Pratt Whitney located there, because that was a major tenant and a major revenue source.
I don't think there's any question marketing is going to be involved. I think it's too early for this legislative, I don't think the county legislative body is going to be involved in the marketing. What can we do in the future? Part of the option is to hire a marketing. You got to think of Montreal and that facility with charters and things like that. The ability to take the South Shore of Quebec with a population of, I can't tell you right off the top of my head, but if you had Gary Douglas here and you asked him that question, Bob, he'd have you here for a week because of his optimism of the way these areas can grow. And I think it's important that's the approach that we take. I mean, I don't think it's a pie in the sky. I don't think it's a build them and they will come. I think it's the facility is here. Now we have to market. Things will happen. Our concern is to make sure the industrial side continues to grow. Cargo continues to grow. Maintenance continues to grow. As that happens, with the border and the way the border's grown, with the increase there's going to be more and more flights or corporate jets and whatever that need to get in here. I mean, that's just the way we look at it. And I don't think there's any question in the future marketing is going to be a huge part of it.
You're marketing to the airlines and stuff in an effort to get them in here, but what about the passenger base? Most of the people in the area now go to Dorval because it's cheaper, or they go to Burlington because it's convenient, and we've got the discount airline in there. Where are the passengers going to come from to sell these airlines to come in here?
Well, I think, again, Southern Quebec, again, every time I go to Burlington, I see 5 or 6 people from Plattsburgh. And when was the last time you flew out, or I flew out of Plattsburgh, and I fly quite often? It's been a long time. That's got to change. That has to change. Essex County and Lake Placid and that area on bigger jets, that has to change. So the passenger base, when you think of this county and you think of Franklin County and some of the surrounding areas plus Montreal, you got a pretty good sized passenger base if you can get them here. Right now, there's no reason for them to come here. It's a lot cheaper to go to Montreal than on fly, as long as you make sure you have your car when you get back. I don't know, gentlemen, does anybody want to jump in on this? Any of you people want to?
What kind of employment opportunities do you see at this facility in
The terminal building itself?
the future? The whole operation.
That's a good question. I don't know that I have an answer for that. The employment opportunities for the terminal building and
The industrial side will cover the lion's share of new jobs, I would think. And we have at least one new tenant that's growing, Air One, and they're creating a lot of jobs as we speak. I can't tell you what numbers we're talking about.
Would it cost $250,000 or so to run the county airport now?
Correct.
Will that continue to be that way, or do you eventually see that?
Well, the county airport will close.
Yeah, I know, but will the new facility be a break-even type thing, or make money, or eventually, or?
Again, we're talking the future. I guess what I'm saying is our analysis tells us that the industrial base as it exists today, if you take that level, add to the $250,000 that we're paying for the county airport, we're very close to what it's going to cost to operate the new facility. If that industrial basis increases, we'll be into the black.
So your
I don't know how else to say it.
your annual cost for the new airport will be 1.2 million a year.
Roughly,
And you're getting
yes.
700,000 from
750.
income,
Today, yeah.
so you're short
Yeah.
a little bit a
A
year.
little bit, but we're growing. So, I mean, it is not all bad news. It's, we're very close. If we didn't feel this was doable, I can assure you we wouldn't be here.
You get federal money too, right?
Federal money is for capital improvement projects only, not for the operation of the airport. There's a difference there.
I got a question before I ask my question. Did I hear right? It used to be 22,000, now it's down to 3,000? Is that what Ralph
That's right.
said?
That's correct.
So we've dropped it down to 1/7 of what it was 10, 12 years ago? Okay. My question has nothing to do with that. I'm wondering what hurdles we have, based on commitments we have to tenants on that base right now, such as Pratt Whitney or whatever. What hurdles have you had to overcome because of commitments to those tenants?
Tenants that are at the...
I've heard that they-
Clinton County Airport or at...
They had concessions for use of the runway or whatever. Are there hurdles that you had to overcome because of the commitments to them?
If I understand, let me just make sure I understand the question. You're not talking about the tenants that are located at the Clinton County Airport?
No.
You're talking about Park and the facility
Yeah.
with Pratt Whitney and Air One
Yeah,
and
right.
whatever's going there?
Right.
Okay.
We have a project going on this summer narrowing the runway. Pratt & Whitney has agreed to not fly their 747 this summer during the months of July and August to accommodate our schedule. There's an exception to that. And then in our bid package to the contractor, we put a requirement in there to be able to open the runway with 24 hours advance notice, because there will be some other aircraft coming in that Air One will be working on. So we've tried to, so yes, they've been very accommodating. I don't know if is that your question?
Yeah, they have no priority over the county use of that?
No. When we close the runway to give that runway to a contractor, the aircraft cannot use it. Now, that's pretty much true. We can take a segment of the runway, the north end or the south end, out of service, temporarily put a displaced threshold in, and allow a contractor to work on the closed section of the runway. And we've done that. When we take the center of the runway down, the runway will be closed. But we have put into the contract a requirement for the contractor to be able to open the runway with 24 hours notice.
Yeah, I think in summary, I mean, we want to keep our industrial partners up to date, and we have, because that's the goose that's laying the golden egg. If we don't have them, then we have a problem. So we've included Pratt Whitney and Air One and these other facilities in our program, so they know exactly what we're doing when we do it.
Bob, at the beginning, you said that, the airline industry is down right now.
There's no question about it.
I think it's going to come back. That's a pretty big if.
I don't think it's a big if, George.
What makes
I really don't think it's a big if. If you think about where we are in this country, and you think about, I'm old, so I can remember what it was like to fly back in the 50s, early 50s, and where you can go now, and how you can transport goods now to wherever in the world you want to go. If suddenly the air industry didn't come back, and one of the comments I used to say, well, are we going to put yak farms in, or are we going to, I mean, I know where I get a lot of yaks out of the fall, if that's where you think we're going to end up, and I don't. I think that there are going to be some consolidation. There's no question that after 9/11, people are concerned about flying, but I'll tell you right now, it's a lot safer to fly now than it was prior to 9/11. And the airlines are improving that all the time. So I really see this country growing based on moving people and goods and whatever. I mean, it's trucks, trains, and airplanes. And that, I haven't heard anybody say that's not going to happen, that we're going to be going back to the 30s. I just don't see that. I mean, I think you have to stay optimistic. If those industries don't come back, then the whole country's in trouble.
Bob, is there a certainty, or Ralph, or whoever, is there a certainty that Clinton County will always have at least the level of passenger service that it has now? Or any level of service?
I would hope so, but Ralph, you might want to.
Flying none.
Certainty is always a difficult concept. The Essential Air Service program is still viable, although reduced in size from, say, 10 years ago. And we are an eligible community. And actually, as a part of Commute Air's application for that subsidy, we've learned something. The original legislation identified the Clinton County Airport as a recipient of that subsidy. So the question then comes up, well, what if we close the county airport? Is Plattsburgh International eligible? I mean, we know the intent of the legislation was to make the community eligible, but the question is, for the lawyers, could Plattsburgh International be eligible? That question has been aired, it has been answered. Plattsburgh International is eligible. So there is a subsidy. The bad news is there's a local participation now required for the Essential Air Service program, ranging from 10% to 25%. And they're writing that legislation today, and I don't know yet what that total impact is. But in any event, there is a subsidy available to help ensure air carrier service for this community into the future. There are other mechanisms that can be employed. And one of the reasons we have service today, we basically, with the county airport, had relatively low-cost rental agreements that encouraged industrial growth, and that's why Commute Air grew and is located in Plattsburgh. They then invested in buildings and facilities at our airport. Because they invested in those buildings and they exist today, they're here today. I would suggest that if they didn't own those buildings, they might not be here.
Ralph, do they qualify for subsidy, Commute Air?
Yes.
What are the chances of them getting it?
That I can't answer. I can tell you there's competition, and the big competitor is Mesa up in the North Country.
If Commute Air owns the buildings at the Clinton County Airport, how do they feel about moving to the Plattsburgh International?
You're talking about the relocation effort, basically, and that's an issue. It's a separate issue from the terminal. I don't want to get into that in any great detail. I will just say that when we close the county airport, there is an obligation of the county to buy the facilities owned by entities at the county airport, like Commute Air. We have to buy those facilities at what we'll call fair market value. There is a procedure we must go through to determine fair market value, including two separate appraisals and a review appraisal in the state of New York. Once we determine fair market value, we buy those buildings. That takes care of the real estate issue. There then is a relocation issue. If we put them out of business by closing the county airport, we're obligated to relocate them, or any other tenant at the county airport for that matter. Just as if we put a road through your house, we're required to relocate you. We will, and we are working on a plan to identify all the issues of relocation, and CNS Engineering will be working, helping us through that process, because there are a lot of legal involvements there. But generally, that's the process. We buy them out, and we phase the county airport out, and those that want to go to the new facility relocate, and we attempt to accommodate their needs.
Any idea what it costs to relocate them?
Do you fear that that would be a difficult issue to resolve?
No. No, the real estate's mostly money, and and it's not like we're closing an airport and there won't be an airport here. There will be. So I don't see any of those issues as being insurmountable.
Relocation cost a lot?
Yeah, I don't think it's
a short
distance. It's not a showstopper.
Yeah.
That'll be news conference number 2 or 3 down the road. When we determine, and it's an important question, when we determine what we do with the existing air facility that we have at the Clinton County Airport, that is a huge decision to be made, because therein lies revenue generating to run first of all, to relocate, because the relocation costs are not MAP's funding. That's money that has to be spent from other funds. So that is a huge hurdle that has to be looked at, and has to be looked at carefully, and it's so that we can generate as much income as we can from that area. And that's Act Two.
Would you say being on the airport committee is as tough as pulling teeth?
It's probably as tough as being at 23,000 feet. It's interesting. But you know what? It's exciting because you don't get a chance in government a lot of times to do something from square one, to take an idea. And that's what the whole group did. And everybody that's sitting here, we took an idea and we said, are we going to do it or aren't we going to do it? We have an ability, let's do it or don't. And I'm an optimist. And so is the whole group. And to take it and actually be able to not only build the facility, but to pick the chairs out is an exciting time. And it's an exciting time. I realize, as I said before, the industry's in trouble, but it will come back. So it's been fun, and it drives us, and it's exciting, and hopefully you'll come back here and we'll, 5 or 10 years down the road, we can have, with 400 people, we can have a dance out here, I'll tell you that. I don't know if there's anything else.
One final thing about it. People will be hearing this report and they got only one thing on their mind. That's because the racetrack has been thrown out there. You mentioned reuse. If you had to put a number on it from 0 to 10, the probability of that ever happening?
You know, I don't know what'll happen, and Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, and you might want to come up here and address this. There will be, this will go out to bid, as I understand it, but Mike.
Exactly. There's no one entity that the county singled out as purchasing the present county airport property. By law, we have to go out to bid. I can tell you, the chairman is in contact with the developer, and it's who has no formal relationship with NASCAR. Getting reported, but there's no formal relationship. There's a gentleman interested. He's still interested, but we've got to follow the law. So it's a possibility. It's certainly, and at that point, the board has to make a decision whether or not that's a use they feel is compatible with the community.
Had enough?
No, I appreciate y'all holding off, because I know Channel 5's been after me. You've asked me, Joe, and people have asked, and I've sort of said, let's wait and let us get a little bit down the road before we do this. And we'll be as open as we can. I appreciate the fact that you've held off as long as you have.
We've been embedded.
I know, yeah.
No more fish concerts?
Indebted.
Fish concerts, I would doubt it. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.